Hi, it's Tracy. Hello. And if we've not met before, welcome to my home here in Sussex, England. Now, last episode, I took you on the whole transformation of this guest cottage. This episode, we're going to come out onto the veranda here and I'm going to give it a new look and feel. Lots of upcycling, recycling, repurposing. But one thing we are not going to do is spend lots of money. You join me partway through the makeover, i.e. after all the boring cleaning has been done. Now, I've taken lots of things off. I've also taken down the porch swing because I'm going to give that a bit of a revamp. I am leaving on the big corner unit there because I've just given that a clean and I like it and it's going to stay. We've got the furry supervisor poised and ready there, just need to check in. We're also going to do something with that bathtub as well. So are we ready, Bertie? No, we've got to do a zoomie or two. And then I think we'll be good to go. Now, let's get out onto the driveway and we'll get set up. We've got 3 projects that we're going to do here. And then we might also do a few other little bits as well. First one up is the rocking chair. Now, I've had this for some years. I picked it up at auction for an absolute song. It was all blonde wood, but then I coloured it up. I had some old red paint that I mixed with white, but now I think it's time for a change. I've recently been having a dabble with green. I bought 2 tins of the Annie Sloan chalk paint, and from the first tin, I've managed to do a bookcase, some candelabras, and a coffee table, and I didn't even use a whole tin, so we're going to carry on using that colour. Now, for the rocking chair, once I've covered up that seat, I'm actually going to do a colour wash. So it uses so little paint, so it's really economical. There are lots of different ways you can do colour washes, but basically it's watered down paint. But rather than mixing the paint, I'm actually just using a rag on this chair. I just find it so much easier to get in and out of everywhere, rather than using a brush first and then going in with a rag and taking bits off that way. As the chair is going to be outside, I'm not going to wax it. I'm going to use matte lacquer, and right on cue my delivery arrived. I love the company that I buy this from because they always write little messages to me in the packaging. They now sell on Amazon as well, so I'll link it in the description below if you're in the UK. So I'm happy with the effect that that's created. I'm going to leave that to dry. And I've still got, this is my first tin, so I've still got paint left. Now we're going to move on to the porch swing. In the last episode, I showed you the details of this and how I coloured it up using Osmo white oil stain. It took on a slight pink tinge, which actually worked brilliantly sat near the pink rocking chair. But it's time for a change, so we're going to get this green paint on. This time I'm going to roller it. I love these microfiber rollers. Obviously there's tin foil in my tray, and remember, with a new roller, rinse and spin before you begin. It stops all those fibers getting into your paint. The roller will do the bulk of the work, and then I've just got a very small brush, a 1/2 inch brush, that I'll use to cut in between all those slats. So tell me, what do you think of this shade of green? I actually find it really quite restful, but then I see green as a neutral, so I'm quite happy to use it in amongst my neutral schemes. Now, that's 2 coats on that swing seat, and I'm going to just let all that dry off and we'll move on to the 3rd project. This is an old school desk. I bought it full height and then just chopped the legs off, and I've been using it as a coffee table. Now, I was thinking about painting this green because it is going back onto the veranda. It's got some marks on it, but actually what I think I'm going to do is just sand that top down, varnish it up, and then find some other green pops so I can pull that green colour across the veranda. Now, I've found this old tray. I've had it outside for a couple of years and I love the way that it's rusted up, all that rust showing through the paintwork. So I'm going to give that a good splattering in green, and then I'm going to hope that that rust will start to bleed through the green and bring all that character back. I'm going to give it a couple of coats and then I'll finish it in the matte lacquer. Now I'm going to do a couple more accessories. This is actually made of terracotta and it's a lantern, a lamp. Used to put paraffin accelerant in there and there was a little wick, but the top part where the wick pulls through and you light it is completely sealed up. It's seized. So I think that's going to be a nice big pop of green. It's quite heavy as well. So again, I've got the roller out. I don't want to be wasting any of this paint because I'm trying to see how much I can get out of 2 tins. So I'm just whizzing that roller over. Again, it will be 2 coats and then finishing with the matte lacquer. Now what to do with that little container? I'm going to spray it up. I'm going to use a gold spray that I use that looks very much like brass when it's finished. I've also found another tray that's been outside with plant pots on. It's got so much algae on it, it's almost green anyway. But after a good clean, that will get coloured up as well. Now, while all that is drying, we're going to hop back over to the rocking chair and I'm just going to tickle the head of my sander over it to give a very slight distress. Not necessary, but I like that type of finish. I'm also going to do it on the swing seat as well. Again, not heavily, but just taking very small areas down and working along edges. I'm using a sanding sponge just to go over each of the planks, just to smooth everything down and then finish off with a vacuum before I give 2 coats of the lacquer. So while all that is curing, let's move on to the veranda and to the bathtub. So this is a French bateau. It is antique, it's well over 100 years old. Remember, if it's under 100, it's collectible and vintage. So this was found on eBay by a chap who had restored it. Somebody had done the enameling, which is just wonderful. And then they went and spoilt it by brushing the paint on rather than spraying or rollering. But anyway, let's not be unkind. This is our 2nd tin of paint and this is how much we've got left. So I'm going to use the roller again because it just gives that nicer finish. Yes, I could spray it, but it would be very difficult, the main tub now, because it's all plumbed in and in position. The Annie Sloan paint gives such great coverage and I'm just using the roller with a very small brush to do the cutting in work. Again, I'm going to give it 2 coats and then finish with the matte lacquer. Now, I do have a video on how to use the matte lacquer because it reacts a little bit differently than paint. You've got to treat it a different way. So I link that in the description below. Do check that out if you're interested. This is how much paint we've got left, so we can still do another project. I've had such good value out of these 2 tins of paint. I've now done 9 different items with another one to come. So that will have been 10 in total. Definitely value for money. Okay, we are ready now to start styling. And yes, the chair has come out because I'm somewhat vertically challenged. Gosh, you wouldn't think I lived in a house with 2 men, would you? Constantly having to lump furniture around by myself. Anyway, this is a charity shop find, £40. I thought it was an absolute bargain. Came with some green cushions, the base and the back. But this time, don't know if I'm going to use the cushions, but really love the cane. I'm so glad I didn't paint it as well. Now, where is the other bloke I live with? Bertie, boy, he just does not look as though he's up for any supervision at the moment, does he? Do you remember this, my regular viewers? We found this at a charity shop for £10, this huge sisal rug, which foolishly I went and folded instead of rolling. And so now you can see the crisscross lines in it, but they will ease themselves out over a day or two. The old school desk is coming back on as the coffee table. So in the end, I just very lightly sanded down that top and took off any of the dirty marks, and then I put 2 coats of the lacquer on as well to protect it through the winter. And I think they sit really well together. Now, I need chairs in that corner and in this area. I have got some chairs that I picked up on eBay for a whopping £23. £23 for 2 chairs and a table. So I was really quite pleased with that. I then just lightened them up, gave them a quick spray, and we've had them for several years now and they're wearing really well. So I'm happy with the layout now in that sort of sitting area, but let's go down to my storage shed because there's another little project I want to do. This is where I store a lot of items that are in transition, moving from one area, don't really like them anymore, they're waiting for a revamp before they go into another area, or things that just won't get damaged in here. So this is a basket that I picked up on a recent shop and haul video. If you want to watch that, I'll link it below. I paid just £8 for the basket, and I thought actually it's going to make a great planter. So I found these geraniums for just £2.99 each from Home Bargains, and they're such a great size. I couldn't resist. I took all the gubbins off, and as I always do when I'm taking gubbins off things, I keep them. Anything that I think might come in useful in the future, I always set to one side. Now, I had originally planned on changing the colour of this completely, but I've got these 2 part-used cans of spray left over, which I don't particularly like the spray. So I thought it would be ideal just to freshen up the Moses basket, just to bring that bright white back. Now, to line it, I didn't particularly want to use black plastic because you'd be able to see it through. But we had, just waiting for the recycling, this big builder's sack that's got a hole in the bottom. So I thought that might be useful. I then thought about maybe painting some breeze blocks just to elevate the basket. But I thought a much better idea would be to use old spindles, although they were slightly too long. So I just used a handsaw and a miter box in order to shorten them. If you've not used a miter box before, do have a look for one. I will link one below. I'll find one and link one below because they are so inexpensive and they really help with a handsaw. I popped the basket onto a board because I knew once I'd added the liner, the soil, and then all the plants, it was going to be really heavy to move, and also I didn't want to risk the bottom falling out. And once all that was planted up, I did get the boys to move it over to the cottage. Time to bring a few more pieces on. One tip I would give here is if you're about to take something apart, to refurb it, to do something to it, take photographs of exactly where all the fixings go, how you need to put it back together again, or film yourself doing it, because trust me, it saves so much time. Trying to remember all those sequences, it's not worth it. Just photograph it. That's my structure done, my key items in position. And then from here, I like to start layering up. It's like painting a picture. You get your big brush strokes in first. But now I like to go on to putting fabrics out, because only then can I step back and see exactly what it is that I would like to accessorize with. So fabrics are key for me at this stage. I am going on with the cushions that originally came with the sofa, but I'm not going to put the back cushions on. And I'm also going to bring out a couple of the throws that I bought at the end of last summer, and I used them in my autumn, my fall styling, but this time I'm going to use them for summer. So I like to keep on using what I already have. Now, I was in town a few weeks ago and I was checking out the fabrics, as I always do, and then something caught my eye and I thought, oh, hello, you're saying summer to me. £15 for 5 meters of fabric, a very nice thick canvas. Well, when I got to the till, I had an even bigger surprise. They only charged me £1. It was a £1 for everything day. So I was absolutely delighted, popped into the local haberdashery and found a perfect match. And this is the length of fabric that I got. So I thought, ideal to make some cushions. Don't be under any illusion that I actually know what I'm doing here. I am not a sewer. I am very new to this. I've borrowed a machine back from my daughter that I bought her as a present, watched a few YouTube videos and started to make some cushion covers. Now I decided with this one, because I had so much fabric and I wasn't going to use it for anything else, that actually I could afford to do it all in one piece. I know that uses more material rather than cutting sections and pinning and sewing. I worked out as well that I had 2 ends that were good, so I didn't need to sew anything on there. So I took the raw edges, the 2 raw edges, and just rolled them and pressed them. The material was so thick that I didn't need to bother with tacking stitches or pinning or anything like that. And because it was striped, perfect lines to follow. So it made life a lot simpler. This is definitely my new way forward for decorative cushions now. Go around the charity shops, find the fabric, find old curtains, anything that kind of fits the bill, fits the season, then whip up some new covers. Now, once I'd got the panels stitched on each side, I then brought in the pad and pulled the fabric over to create an envelope, making sure that I left enough fabric at the top that I would be able to either just drop it over or tuck it in. Once I made sure everything was level, I didn't even bother pinning it. You know, this is such thick fabric, it really kept its form, kept the shape. I then ran a stitch all the way down, going over the stitch that I'd already done. I then went with another stitch in the coral stripe because I found that if it, just veered over into the cream, then it showed and it looked a mess. So kept very straight stitches, popped the pad back in, and then we were ready to tuck it in and feel very smug with oneself that I'd actually made a cushion cover really quickly, and think it looks all right. It does the job for summer out on the veranda. It's not like I'm going to be selling them on Etsy. And for £1, goodness me, you couldn't get better. Now, my first attempt, I'm going to be honest here, was a bit of a disaster. I worked out that actually I just needed to cut off this coral stripe each time. So when I did a panel, I had cream on each side. I could fold those in, and then my panels at the side would both be coral, and they just look so much smarter. So of course the production factory was underway and I was knocking these babies out of the park. Took me a whole day, but thoroughly enjoyed it. Over to these chairs. Now the base has metal springs in it, and what I don't want to happen is the metal to make rust marks on any fabric. So just by using a piece of cardboard underneath what is a back cushion of another set of cane furniture that I bought, just protects it and makes sure that no marks come through. Oh, and for all you Bertie fans, just to let you know that there is a little bit of footage right at the end of the video that you might enjoy, so stay tuned. The pale pink throws here were originally from HomeSense many years ago, and I use them in the house. But what I do with my fabrics and my throws is they kind of go through stages, and when I don't want them in the house anymore, I bring them outside, and then they live out here until they live no more. This is the other throw, the one that I used on the sofa. I've also brought the other one down here just to link both ends of the veranda. So all the time I'm looking from each end to make sure that everything is balancing, that the colours are being pulled through. I'm not going to add anything to the rocking chair because I quite like it how it is, but I am going to bring out a few more throws in this big basket that I found at auction. We are in England after all, and it does get chilly here. At the moment, it's a really cold summer. How is it with you? What's the weather like where you are? Do tell me. I'm English. I like to talk about weather. And the final fabric is a thick coir doormat. Time to dress the big corner dresser. And yes, the chair is back out because I need to reach up high. And we're back down in the storage shed. We're going to have a look for some items to use. I love crates. I've got so many different crates. Also crockery. I quite often get job lots from auction and they're cracked and they're chips and things like that in them. But I can always find a use for them. Baskets is another weakness, and again I do get quite a lot at auction. You quite often find them bundled together. I think we're going to have a little bit of faux foliage as well. Now I want to show you a charity shop find. I came across this pitcher and bowl. There was also another item with it as well, all for £5. Now they're really big substantial pieces, but they are all cracked. Instantly I thought stone effect, but look at the colours in them. They would work beautifully out here. So my cunning plan is to use them this summer out on the cottage veranda, and then come the autumn when I'm switching the decor up again, I'll then give them the stone effect. If you've not seen that before, I will link some videos below. It's a technique that I do that creates a beautiful faux stone effect. But be warned, it's highly addictive. Remember that algae covered tray? And the terracotta lantern. crack in the bowl when I put it at the back was really visible, but when I rotated it to the front, less so. Let's move on to the little side table now. At this end, I want to put some pops of green, so I think we will go with something fresh. Let's go around and have a look at all my hydrangeas. Now, I do cuttings every year, and all of these are from cuttings, so they're all free plants. I do have a video on how I do them, and again, I will link that below in the description box. Always check down in the description box because there's lots of useful information in there. These are not even a year old on the trolley there in the black pots. And I've actually got an Annabelle. Well, I've got 4 Annabelles that I've managed. This is the mother plant, and come July, these are going to be huge white heads, giant heads. And there is a secret to getting them so big, which I will let you know in another video. But back to the task in hand. So we're looking for a nice shape, and this one's already in a basket, which means I don't have to do anything else to it. So I think this one is going to come and spend a few months on the veranda. Onto the school desk coffee table now. I'm going to bring out the other tray that I did, and that gives that lovely pop of green. Now the next item you might not be expecting, and it's a tray with sherry glasses on it. It was all tarnished, cheap metal, and I sprayed it white, and I'm going to use the sherry glasses as bud vases. This is a glass plate that I did an effect on, and then I'm going to pop on the magazine that the cottage features in. Now, to fill those sherry glasses, let's go and find some sweet peas. The scent from these is just heavenly. Time to move down the other end now, and let's do some styling there. One thing I don't like to see are sockets. Now, we need our sockets, but I don't want to see them. So a really super simple solution is take a basket and just pop it over. This one is shallow enough that it doesn't impede the opening and closing of the door. Problem solved. This carved oak bedhead was found at auction, and I did plan on using it in the house, and then I never got round to it, so I distressed it, put it onto the veranda, and on the top I added a mirror, again that I picked up in a charity shop for not very much money. Now let's just get that rocking chair out of the way, and we need to come up with a cunning plan. This is not a deep shelf, so the cunning plan has to involve something quite narrow. So we've got a garland from Hobby Lobby, and then we're going to bring in brass candlesticks and terracotta pots. And if your candle won't fit in the holder, just take a flame to it, melt the wax slightly and push it in. There is an alternative to this. You could take a product like museum wax, which I find really useful. Take a little ball of it and then either pop it into the holder, or I quite prefer to mold it around the bottom of the candle. Little bit of pressure and it won't go anywhere. Over to the bath now. When we did the homemade taps, I actually used offcuts of wood which are attached to the floor to attach the pipes to. It gave me 3 levels, 3 surfaces, which are really useful, particularly when you are in the tub. Now, I'm quite happy to use this crockery outside. You know, it's cracked, it's chipped, it's not precious. It was probably absolutely gorgeous in its day, but it's not anymore. So on the middle one, I'm going to carry on with that brass theme that we started, and I'm pulling that right the way through with the candle there and the big picture, which actually is only cracked at the very, very top. So that is going to be watertight, and it will mean that we can put a nice big display of flowers in there. So I think the time has come to go out into the fields and let's see what we can find. Let's round up the boy. There he is, finally. He's been a very lazy supervisor this week. If you've not been here before, then this is part of the land that we have, and it is truly my happy place. I walk around here first thing on a morning, first light, with a cup of coffee in my pajamas with Bertie and listening to the birds, you know, the sun coming up. It's idyllic. It's the most peaceful place I have ever lived. Somebody asked me if this was my forever home. Well, I think it kind of is, actually, until we can't manage the property anymore. But at the moment, we're doing just fine. So let's get back to that vase. So we've got so many oxeye daisies growing here. They just grow wild. And lots of bracken, lots of different types of fern as well. So I'm going to take some clippings there, and then we'll take those back in and get them into water and have a lovely free display. No running to the supermarket here for our flowers. Now, normally it would be at this point where I would go into my closing scenes, maybe taking a shot of the water coming out of the tap into the bath, the light shining through. I thought, actually, let's do something a little bit different. Let's sit on the sofa and we'll read a magazine, and I'll have my faithful companion sitting sedately next to me, just relaxing in this sunshine. Well, it didn't really pan out like that. So for Bertie fans, here is the truth. Here's how it really went.
Come on then, Bertie. Go on, I'm going to read my magazine.